Welcome to Quiet Scare, where horror doesn't scream, it whispers. Real documented experiences, carefully adapted into sleep-friendly narration. Sophisticated storytelling meets documentary truth, so the core stays intact and the atmosphere lingers. Quick note, please like and subscribe, and tap the bell for new episodes. There are no more than 3 ads in the first 15 minutes. After that, uninterrupted listening. Curated accounts, elevated with literary craft for sophisticated listeners. Sleep well and dream dark. I don't believe in ghosts, not in the way most people talk about them, but something happened that night that I've never been able to explain, and I've never gone back to that cabin. We were deep in the woods, miles from the nearest paved road, staying in my father's family cabin. It was old, maybe a century if you counted the rough-hewn logs and hand-fitted joints, but it had stood through blizzards, storms, and decades of stories. A place built to last, they used to say. The kind of place where silence settles like dust. It was just after 2 a.m. when I woke up, not to a voice or footsteps, but to a single violent noise, a blow that seemed to shake the back of the cabin, like a battering ram hitting the wall. For a second, I thought a tree had fallen or maybe something massive had landed on the roof. Then I realized it had come from the pantry. I sat up and held my breath. A few seconds later, I heard shuffling in the hallway. My younger brother creeping out of his room, wide-eyed. He wasn't looking for attention. He looked like someone who had been ripped out of sleep by fear. Within a minute, everyone was awake. My parents, my 3 siblings, we were all standing in the hallway, murmuring the same thing. You heard that, right? Dad didn't say anything. He just walked into the main room, grabbed the splitting maul from the wall mount, and headed for the back. He didn't turn on the lights, just moved through the dark like he'd done this before. The rest of us followed, staying close, stepping softly. The pantry door was solid pine, reinforced years ago after a bear tried to claw its way in during a harsh winter. There was only one way in or out, and it was latched from the inside. Still was. The bolt was untouched. He lifted the curtain from the tiny window. The wood pile was there, undisturbed. The trees beyond leaned close in the dark, their limbs bare and motionless. No sign of anything out of place. But the smell in the room had changed. Something faint metallic, like old nails or wet rust. It wasn't strong, just wrong. We checked the whole cabin after that. Every door still bolted from the inside. Every window latched. No footprints in the dusted over snow beyond the porch. No marks on the walls or doors. Just that noise. That one deep, deliberate blow. It hadn't been an accident. We all felt that. We ended up back in the front room, gathered around the dying fire. Nobody wanted to say the word out loud, but the cabin had its own stories. Whispers of light seen from the trees, voices heard when no one was there, cold spots near the pantry even in July, stories we'd grown up hearing but never believed. That night, belief didn't matter. No one wanted to sleep. We stayed close, barely speaking, each of us listening for anything. Another thud, a creak, even footsteps, but nothing came. Just the low crackle of the fire and the sound of the wind rising through the trees outside. Eventually we returned to our rooms. The beds felt smaller. The dark pressed harder. I lay awake for hours, replaying the sound again and again in my mind. Not a crash, not a stumble, a strike, like someone or something had wanted in. In the morning, the pantry was just a pantry again. The snow showed no tracks. The doors were locked just as we left them. But something in the house had changed. It felt heavier, like the place had been reminded of something, or had reminded us. We only stayed one more night, but nothing happened again. Not exactly. Still, none of us forgot what we heard, and none of us have been back alone. Some places remember what you try to forget. I first noticed something was off when the power blinked in our hallway. Just a second of darkness, then the lights snapped back harsher than before. We'd arrived that afternoon. A cluster of students dumped into a foreign city for a language immersion trip. I hadn't slept much the night before the flight, or the night before that either. A month of finals had my sleep schedule cratered into nothing. I told myself I was just overtired. Our hotel was older, built around a narrow central staircase with paper-thin walls and glass-pane doors to each room. I shared a third-floor double with Marcus, who passed out face down after dinner. The others were scattered across the second and third floors. One teacher had a single room downstairs near the reception. I stayed up. I told myself I was decompressing, scrolling with one hand while my other cradled a lukewarm bottle of water. Around midnight, I saw the message thread shift. Someone claimed to have seen something at their window. Third floor. That made no sense. Our windows faced an alley with a sheer brick wall barely 4 feet away. I opened our curtain. There was nothing there. I lingered, not sure why. My eyes adjusted. The alley lit only by a flickering bulb above a service door. Then, just for a second, something moved at the edge of the pane. A shape. It ducked out of view too quickly to make sense of it, like it knew the exact moment I'd look. I pressed closer to the glass but saw only my reflection. I stared long enough to start seeing it move even when it didn't. A door slammed somewhere below. I jumped and backed away from the window. Through the floorboards, muffled thumping traveled upward. Irregular, heavy, like someone with uneven shoes walking in tight circles. I shook Marcus. He groaned but didn't wake. At 1:30 a.m., the thumping had escalated. Now it was sharper, more rhythmic. I couldn't tell if it was coming from inside the building or from the alley. Every few minutes it would stop for a while, then restart, slightly louder. I gave up trying to sleep and went to check on someone else. I found Cam and Jenna down the hall, both awake, both whispering about something they'd seen in the stairwell. A figure pausing halfway down, unmoving for too long, then continuing silently. Cam had locked their door. We agreed to head downstairs together to find a teacher. I left a note for Marcus in case he woke up. On the second floor, we passed Anna's room. Her door was open. I'll never forget how she looked. She was kneeling on the floor just inside the threshold. Her spine twisted sharply, arms stiff at her sides. Her mouth moved without sound. Her eyes were glassy but focused, tracking us with jerky, almost mechanical movements. We didn't speak. Cam slowly reached to close the door, but Anna's head turned so sharply toward him that it made his breath catch. He pulled his hand back. We backed away, fast, down the stairs, skipping the last few steps. At the bottom, the lobby was empty. No sign of the night clerk. The glass door to the street was shut tight. Outside, a light fog had crept in. Then came the knocking. It started from the far end of the hallway that led to the rear stairwell. Loud, deliberate. I couldn't tell what was being struck. Wood, metal, maybe glass, but it was a full-body kind of impact, like someone throwing themselves against something solid in a fixed rhythm. We retreated into the lounge, shut the door behind us, sat in silence. The pounding didn't stop. It sped up once, slowed, stopped entirely, then resumed in triple bursts, like a pattern. Jenna whispered that it was Morse code, but she couldn't tell what it spelled. I opened the group chat. Half the students were awake. Some reported noises at their doors. One swore she heard whispering through the keyhole. Someone else had called the teacher's phone. No answer. Around 3 a.m., the pounding hit the front door. Not a knock, not fists. It sounded like a shoulder or torso, hammering the glass just beside the lock. I could see the door flex slightly with each impact. I couldn't see anything through the fogged window. No shape, no outline. Then it stopped. Nothing moved for 10 whole minutes. I checked my phone again. Dead. So was Cam's. Jenna's battery held on 2%. She turned off everything but the flashlight. We decided to make one more attempt to reach a teacher. We crept out of the lounge and made our way toward the hall behind the reception desk. There, at the base of the rear stairwell, was someone pounding with both fists against the emergency exit, a tall silhouette framed in the red exit light. They didn't turn when we approached. They didn't stop. Their hands kept slamming in perfect rhythm. 1, 1, 2, pause, 1, 1, 2. We backed away slowly, returned to the lounge. I couldn't process it anymore. I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes, just for a moment. When I opened them, it was morning. Daylight cut through the glass doors. Jenna was snoring lightly on the couch. Cam was sitting upright, his eyes wide but empty. He didn't remember falling asleep either. Outside, the fog had lifted. Inside, the hotel was quiet. We never found out who or what had been at the door. Anna had no memory of being in the hallway. She insisted she'd been asleep the whole night in bed, and even showed us photos of her room from before midnight. She looked normal in all of them. The teachers dismissed the whole thing, said we were overtired, suggested group hysteria. Most of the others bought that. Maybe they needed to. Maybe I do too. That afternoon I finally slept. 12 uninterrupted hours, deeper than I'd ever slept in my life, and I dreamed of nothing. Nothing at all. It started with a sound, not a crash or a bang, nothing that dramatic, just a light, dry tapping at the living room window. I was 6 the first time I heard it, sitting on the floor with my sister while cartoons murmured in the background. The tapping came 3 times, soft and fast. I looked over, and there, through the gap in the curtain, was the top of a small head, just barely, like someone a little shorter than me was standing on the porch watching. My sister noticed too. She didn't say anything, but she got up and walked into the kitchen to find our aunt. I stayed. The tapping came again, and this time I moved closer. When I pulled the curtain aside, the porch was empty. It had rained earlier that morning, and the concrete was still damp, but there were no footprints, just leaves stuck to the wet steps. That wasn't the only time someone saw it. Over the next few weeks, our relatives visiting, leaving, coming through the front door would pause and ask if the neighbor kid had been over. One uncle even said he saw a little boy peeking in through the window while unloading groceries, except there was never anyone there when they checked. The neighbors didn't have kids, neither did the couple across the street. I saw him next in my room. I'd woken up around 3, the kind of wakefulness that doesn't come with a reason. The moonlight came in from the window and cut across the carpet. At the far end of the room, between the dresser and the closet door, a figure stood just the outline of a small child, completely still, his head tilted slightly. I remember the way his arms hung too low and too straight. I didn't scream, I don't know why. I just pulled the blanket over my face and held still until I fell asleep again. When I told my sister the next morning, she made me swear not to tell anyone else. After that, I started talking to him. I didn't decide to, it just sort of happened. I'd be alone in the room and feel like someone was nearby, quiet and waiting. So I'd say things out loud to the air, to the room, to whatever it was, and sometimes things would move. A toy car would shift. A book would slide off the edge of the table. Once I dropped a marble and it rolled under the bed, but when I looked again it was back in the center of the room, as if someone had rolled it back. There was one night, maybe a year or 2 after the first window sighting, when I felt something different. I was playing with blocks on the floor, alone. I'd asked out loud, "Do you want to build something too?" I didn't expect anything, but then there was a noise like a block falling just behind me. I turned, and one had indeed tipped over, although I hadn't touched it. I was about to reach for it when I heard it, the creak of the closet door slowly shifting open. I froze. The closet had always been a normal part of the room, just shelves and old clothes. But that night it felt wrong. There was no breeze, no draft, but the door had moved, just a few inches. I felt something then, not the small quiet presence I was used to, but something older, bigger, watching from behind the door. I didn't say anything, I didn't move. I just stood up, picked up the blocks, and left the room. After that, I avoided the closet at night. Even when the child presence was around what I'd come to think of as him, I felt like that adult presence was always close behind, like a shadow standing just out of sight. We lived in that house until I was 11. Over the years, the feelings didn't go away, but I got used to them. The little glimpses, the movements, the sense of being watched, those became part of the house, just like the creaky stairs or the rust-stained sink in the upstairs bathroom. My sister and I would talk about it sometimes in whispers, but it stopped being scary. It just was. When we finally moved out, I remember walking through my room one last time. The walls were bare, the bed gone, the carpet matted down where furniture had stood. I stood in the doorway and said goodbye, quietly, half to the room and half to whatever might still be there. There was no reply, no movement, just the faint smell of old wood and the dust rising in the afternoon sun. But for the first time, I felt like it was okay to leave, like whoever or whatever had been with me all those years was letting go, too. People think haunted means old plaster, slanted floors, and 100 winters of creaks. But this place was new. So new the baseboard still tacky whispered when you ran a finger along the caulk. Fresh paint, straight lines, smart locks that chirped. If a building could come with a birth certificate, mine would have been laminated. The first week, it was nothing I could swear to. A sleeve of Crackers lighter, a coffee pot or two gone, a folded paper towel in the trash with a toothpaste smear I couldn't place. I'd just moved in. I was tired. I told myself I was counting wrong. Still, I started keeping a mental tally. How many bananas in the fruit bowl? How far the olive oil cap turned before it met resistance? 2 nights later, around that hour when the whole city is a held breath, I woke to a scraping sound. Faint, careful, like someone using the edge of a plastic lid against metal. The noise rose, paused, tried again. I lay still and measured my breathing against it. When it stopped, I got up and did the rounds. Deadbolt, window latches, the balcony slider, everything locked and flush. It was January cold, the glass giving off a metallic bite. New building settling. I whispered, that's what people say to themselves to keep from saying the other thing. My cousin was crashing on the couch for a few days while he looked for a place nearby. He's practical, broad-shouldered from warehouse work. Exactly the sort of presence that should make a place feel anchored. In the morning, he lifted an empty protein shake bottle from the recycling, turned it, and gave me a look. Neither of us had finished it. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I added it to the list with the missing banana and the olive oil crystallized around the cap. There was a sealed developer space behind the laundry closet, what the property manager had breezed past on the tour. Blocked until final utilities, she'd said, and smiled as if that explained a thin painted-over rectangle in my wall. Above the dryer, a small access panel for shutoff valves. Around it, a larger seam, the kind of thing you don't see unless you start looking for seams. That night, the scrape returned, longer now, with listening silences tucked between attempts. I stood barefoot in the hallway, the cold coming like a draft from under the laundry door. I pressed my ear to the wood and tapped once. Light. The sound stopped. The quiet was louder than the scrape. I turned on the laundry light, a harsh, bright square that made the rest of the apartment feel like shadow theater. The small panel looked normal. The bigger seam didn't. A hairline crack traced the paint. Gray dust scuffed the baseboard where something heavy had dragged. This is where curiosity overran the fear sitting hot in my throat. I muscled the dryer forward on its squeaking feet, hoses snug, duct connected. And there, down low near the floor, a thin square of plywood wedged into a cutout. Fresh fingernail crescents marked the soft wood. I slid the piece free. Air moved against my face, dry, dusty, and unmistakably human. The sour cloth smell of worn clothing that never quite dries. I pushed my phone light into the opening. A narrow service chase ran left into blackness and right toward the sealed-off developer space. A few inches inside, someone had set an empty paper cup on the concrete, carefully like a coaster placed to claim a spot. Pale smears patterned the dust. Knee, palm, heel. I replaced the board and woke my cousin. We didn't say intruder. We didn't say someone's been living in our wall. We said we'll check in the morning. But we didn't sleep. The scrape returned once more, tentative, and then a new sound, a muffled rubbery thump, like a gasket pulled free. Then that same cold draft shouldering through the closet. At first light we moved the dryer again, less delicately than before. The plywood was skewed, the cutout gaped wider, but the real shock was above, the larger painted seam. Once a suggestion was now an outline you could fit your fingers into. The rectangle had been pried. Not much, but enough. Enough that if you were stronger than the wood screws and patient with the leverage, you could open it. We looked at each other. No ceremony now. I slid the rectangle aside. Beyond, a crawl of raw studs and conduit, then black. The phone light found a wedge of space big enough for a person to hunch and turn. A rolled blanket, a flattened grocery sack of clothes, dark with use, a half-eaten banana browning where the peel cupped it, my missing socks balled and tucked like treasure at the edge, and then movement, a shape detached from the dark at the far end, fast, low, a person no more than a shadow in the cone of light. The head turned just enough to catch a suggestion of cheekbone, then it folded back into the black the way a hand disappears into a sleeve. My cousin swore short and hard. I said, "Hey," but it came out thin. He leaned in and yelled, "We're calling the police." The space answered with a scrape, this one sharp and decisive, and a slamming hollow sound carried down the studs. Somewhere beyond the sealed developer door, a latch shifted. The air pulled again, a small wind through our laundry closet. We backed out. We shut the closet. We locked the deadbolt, as if the deadbolt mattered to a person who walked the building from the inside like a second set of lungs. Then we waited with the kind of stillness that makes your hearing turn animal. We didn't talk about chasing. We didn't talk about cornering. We had already seen enough, the food missing, the clothing cache, the fresh pry of the panel, the unmistakable shape of a person where no person should be. When the police came, the building seemed to swallow their steps. They found the developer door ajar on the service level, the latch bent. They found smears of dust where hands braced. They found nothing else, no one. The officer was kind, careful with his words. "Happens more than you think with new construction," he said. "People learn the guts before the finishes go on. Once it's open, it stays open if someone wants it to." I signed the incident report with a hand that didn't feel like mine. The sun was up, the January light made everything sharp and reasonable again. It did not change the fact that our building breathed air, moving where walls should have been, a person reshaping the boundary between in here and out there. We packed that afternoon. I took stock as I went. The small tally I'd been keeping resolved now into inventory, the crackers, the coffee pods, the socks, the banana, the olive oil, the folded paper towel with someone else's routine in it. My cousin hauled the last box to the car while I stood in the laundry closet one final time, the rectangle screwed back, paint touched up by maintenance, edges neat. If you're looking for rattling chains or a face in a mirror, this isn't that kind of haunting. This is the true kind, where your space learns a second use without your permission, and the walls turn out to be doors for someone stronger, hungrier, more patient than you. I didn't leave because I believed in ghosts. I left because I had seen the shape of a person inside the building's bones, and learned that new doesn't mean sealed, and home doesn't mean yours when someone else knows how to open it from the other side. We drove away before dark. The building receded in the rear view, clean lines and fresh paint catching the winter sun. Unforgettable because now I know. Even brand new places can be haunted by the living. It was the kind of old house you get talked into renting because someone's cousin knew the owner. Cheap charming in a way that meant creaky floors and odd smells, and just remote enough to feel like a good deal. My roommate Jordan and I moved in early fall. The leaves were still clinging to their color, and the nights were just starting to carry that brittle edge. The attic, or more accurately the ceiling space, had only one way in, a square cutout above the hallway with a brittle pull-string ladder. I checked it when we first moved in. Dust, some insulation, no stored junk, no signs of pests, and more importantly, no alternate access. The hatch could only be opened from the hallway. That detail would matter later. It started with the footsteps. At night, almost always after 10. Slow, deliberate pacing. Heavy enough to be unmistakable. Light enough not to be stomping. At first, I thought it might be the house settling or raccoons. But raccoons don't walk in perfect lines. Back and forth above your head. I would stand beneath the hatch, listening, count out the steps without meaning to. Jordan heard them too, though he was quick to shrug it off. "It's an old house," he kept saying, like it explained anything. By the third week, things started moving. I'd find the coffee table books rotated or nudged a few inches from where I left them. One night I set my keys on the kitchen counter, turned to grab a glass from the cabinet, and heard the faint scrape behind me. Turned back. They were on the floor, not fallen. Placed, I remember, because they were lined up end to end, like someone had been inspecting them. I told my friend Marla about it. She worked nights at a nearby gas station and was used to odd hours, so she offered to swing by late and keep me company. That first night she was over. We sat in the living room around midnight, all lights on, pretending to scroll our phones while really just listening. And sure enough, the footsteps started soft overhead, dragging slightly. Marla looked up, then at me. "That's not raccoons," she said. We both knew it. We pulled the ladder down and climbed up. Nothing. Just a void of dust and beams and still air that hadn't moved in years. I even sprinkled flour across the boards up there. The next night, footsteps again. Same pace, same track. I checked the flour, undisturbed. I started talking to it. Not in some ritual or chant, just plain talk. "Who are you? What do you want? Why this house?" I tried different times, different tones. Polite, firm, frustrated. Nothing ever came back. No change in pattern. No sudden crash or gust of wind. Just silence and eventually footsteps again. One night, after weeks of this, I stayed up alone. Jordan was out. Marla had gone home. I sat in the kitchen, lights off, voice recorder running on the table. The footsteps came at 10:17 like clockwork, but this time they stopped midway. I remember holding my breath. The house got too quiet. Then the kitchen chair across from me shifted. Not wildly, not dragged, just a single scrape as if someone had pulled it out a few inches to sit. I didn't move. I just stared at that chair, while the recorder's red light blinked steadily. The recording caught everything. The pacing, the silence, the chair. But when I played it back, there was no sound out of place. No chair scrape, no break in the rhythm. Just me breathing too fast and asking questions into a void that wouldn't answer. We never found a reason. No deaths tied to the house. No local lore. Nothing. And the thing, whatever it was, never escalated. It just kept walking, kept nudging, always just out of reach. I still think about it, about how presence can feel so thick and yet leave no trace, about how some things don't want to be known or named. Eventually we moved out. Nothing followed us, at least not that I know of. But sometimes when my apartment gets too quiet at night, I catch myself listening for it. That slow, patient pacing just above the ceiling. It always started the same way. I'd be standing in my childhood bedroom, everything laid out just how it had been when I was 10. The peeling glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, the warped closet door that never quite shut, the heavy silence that pressed down from above like the air was too thick. I'd look up and feel it, an attention that didn't belong to me. It came from the square crawlspace hatch above my bed, the one that hadn't been opened in years. It wasn't just in the dreams. That feeling of something up there watching bled into waking life too. I'd wake up with my heart pounding, the shape of the dream already slipping, but the sense of dread still gripping my spine. I told myself it was nothing. I even pushed a dresser under the crawl space and climbed up once in broad daylight, opening the hatch. Just dust, old insulation, no sign of anything strange. But the dreams came anyway. Each time, the room in the dream changed slightly. Sometimes my bed was in the wrong corner. Sometimes the wallpaper was gone, leaving stained plaster beneath. But the hatch was always there, and it always pulsed with that presence. I never saw a face or heard a voice, just the heaviness of attention, thick and wrong. It got so I stopped sleeping properly. I'd jolt awake gasping, like I'd been underwater. The worst night began differently. I wasn't in the room, I was outside of it, floating just under the ceiling, as if I'd become the presence myself. I could see the top of my own head, asleep in bed. That version of me stirred and sat up, head turning slowly toward the hatch above. Then something dropped through it, a partial shape like a torso cut clean through, hanging upside down with its arms limp and swinging. It lifted one arm slowly, like a puppet on a rotten string, and pointed right at me. I woke up screaming. That night, I decided I'd had enough. I forced myself to stay awake as long as I could, sitting in bed with all the lights on, but at some point I lost the fight, and the dream didn't wait. This time I was in the hallway. The light under the bedroom door flickered like something was moving inside. I walked toward it, hand trembling as I reached for the knob. The moment my fingers touched it, I was yanked upward, lifted by nothing, dragged feet first into the ceiling, into the space above the room. It was too narrow, too dark, but I was pressed forward by something unseen. I remember the choking sensation first, like cobwebs wrapping around my throat. Then came the sound, wet, slow dragging just behind me. I tried to fight, to twist and push back, but I couldn't move. Something was pressing its weight into my spine, pinning me down. Then I felt it, breath against the back of my neck. It wasn't until I started screaming in the dream that I woke up. I was drenched in sweat, curled in the corner of the bed with my arms clawed around my chest like I'd been trying to rip something off of me. My throat ached, my back burned. I checked in the mirror and found angry red scratches, too spaced out to have come from my own hands. That was the last dream. After that night, the present stopped. The hatch felt empty. The dreams didn't return, but the damage didn't fade. I still sleep with a lamp on. I still flinch when I see attic hatches in other people's homes. Every creak above my ceiling sends my stomach dropping. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I lie perfectly still and wait. The air gets heavy again, just for a moment. It never lasts long, but when it happens, I don't dare look up. It was the kind of night that makes buildings like that feel alive. No wind, no stars, just stillness pressing in from all sides. We'd picked the place on purpose. An abandoned training hospital, mostly stripped, rumored by locals to be heavy with stories, but never officially haunted. That's what drew me in. I don't chase myths, I chase anomalies. Things that make machines stutter or rooms swallow sound. We slipped in through a breach near the service wing, ducking under half-fallen fencing. Jules had heard something on a previous visit, just faint tapping, nothing more. That's what got me interested. I brought the mic array and spectral analyzer. I wanted to see if the building remembered something it wasn't supposed to. The atrium was colder than it should have been. Aaron pointed it out, rubbing his hands, but I was focused on acoustics. Dead air in there, not even echo. I logged it, not surprised. Hospitals are built to absorb sound. We headed down first into the sub-basement to get a baseline. For an hour, nothing. Just concrete silence and long stretches of hallway that swallowed flashlight beams. But back on the third floor, things started to fray. It began with a wall. At first glance, just water damage, or aging paint. But as we stared, it felt off. Your eyes didn't want to stay on it, like something layered beneath was pushing forward, distorting the surface just enough to feel wrong. I ran the parabolic mic across it. Static, then a crack. Not from the wall, from above. A short, deafening concussive burst like metal slammed against stone in a tight room. We jumped. Aaron nearly dropped his light. The sound had no tail, no echo, just a brutal pop and then nothing. We stood frozen. Even Jules, who doesn't spook easily, went pale. I checked the display. No spikes. No signatures. Just a flat line of silence surrounding that one split-second eruption. Then the wall changed. The smear began to shrink, curling into itself like something inside was retreating. There was no opening left behind, just flat, unbroken surface. I said we should go. We moved quickly but carefully, down an east wing hallway I hadn't mapped. It felt unused, full of sagging tiles and rust-flaked carts. Somewhere above us, something shifted. The air itself seemed to flex. Then, another blast. This time closer, loud enough to rattle my teeth. I ducked instinctively, and we all turned for the exit without a word. The main way out was back through the lobby, past the central staircase. But that path felt loaded now, like the building itself didn't want us walking there. We veered off toward a fire door in a gutted ward, one of those places where all the color's been bleached out by time. That's when we saw it. Something moved across the hall. No footsteps, just a shape gliding past the frame of a busted-out doorway. Too quick to track, but slow enough to register wrong. Not shadow, not light trek. Jules raised his hand and pointed but didn't speak. We stood frozen, breathing hard. Then the doorframe was empty again. We pushed forward. The fire door had been pried open long ago, but it still jammed when I shoved it. I threw my weight into it, and there it was. At the threshold stood a figure. Not a person. I'm certain of that. It was dark, but the figure was darker still. No features, no reflection, just a vertical silhouette that didn't seem to belong to any angle of our flashlights. It stood motionless, exactly where we needed to go. Aaron whispered something behind me. Just a choked word. Jules stepped back. I didn't move. Then the lights flickered. Old emergency strips, dead for years, lit up for less than a heartbeat and went out again. When they did, the figure didn't vanish. It was still there, unmoving. We turned and ran, back through the service corridors, past collapsed panels and cracked linoleum. I could feel the air thinning behind us, like something had stirred awake. At the stairwell, Aaron stumbled. Jules hauled him up, and we climbed without thinking. Third floor, then second, then a new sound. Not a blast, a breath. A single low, drawn-in inhalation from below. It filled the stairwell, pulled at my lungs, and then it stopped. We found an old window, shattered, just wide enough. We crawled through, one by one, dropping onto the awning and down into brittle weeds behind the east wing. None of us spoke on the way back to the car. Later, I combed through the audio files. Every section recorded something. Ambient hums, our footsteps, the clicks of our gear, except the third floor. From the first noise onward, there was nothing. Total silence. Not just absence of sound, but a recording of silence. Like the building erased its own voice. I've been back to other places since. Old mills, factories, even a prison once. But that hospital, that place didn't just echo with the past. It remembered, and it didn't want us remembering with it. I always had a habit of turning off unused lights around the house, an old instinct from growing up with my dad's constant reminders about the power bill. That night around 11 p.m. I was doing a last sweep before bed. The house was quiet. My sister was out and our parents were on a trip, so I was alone. I went down the hallway toward the back rooms and flicked off the light to the storage nook near the laundry room. It's a tiny cubby barely wide enough for a rolling cart and some shelves, but it always made the hallway feel too long when it was lit and empty. I turned the knob on the wall and walked away. 3 steps down the hallway, just past the edge of the kitchen tile, I heard it clear as anything. "Hey, can you leave that on?" It was my sister's voice. Soft but distinct, just the way she'd ask when she was grabbing laundry or looking for something. I stopped mid-step. My hand hovered over the counter, like I'd forgotten what I was doing. Then, without thinking, I turned back and switched the light on. I didn't even pause to question it. It felt automatic, like muscle memory responding to her tone. But as I turned back down the hallway, something began to tug at me slowly and steadily, like a rope tightening. She wasn't home. I pulled out my phone and checked. She'd texted me earlier, a selfie from a restaurant across town with friends. Time stamped less than 10 minutes before. There was no way she'd gotten back that fast, let alone without me hearing the door. My stomach tightened in a slow, steady twist. I called her. She picked up on the second ring, still laughing at something in the background. I asked her where she was, trying to sound casual. Maybe too casual. She told me the name of the place again, added that she might stay the night at her friend's if it got late. I didn't mention the voice. I just said okay, have fun, and hung up. The hallway light was still on. I stood there staring at it, not daring to move. I replayed it over and over, how natural it had sounded, how little I'd questioned it. My sister's voice wasn't just close, it was exact. The slight upward inflection at the end, the casual pace, even the faint rasp she gets when she's tired. It had known her voice, it had used her voice. I didn't sleep that night. I left every light on in the house and stayed in the living room with a baseball bat and a weighted blanket across my lap like armor. Nothing else happened, but I kept turning toward the hallway, waiting for something to shift. I kept thinking about how casually it had spoken, how familiar it had sounded, and how easily I had obeyed it. I didn't tell anyone for days. I kept trying to explain it away. Maybe I was tired, maybe I'd imagined it, but the memory stayed too sharp. Too specific, not like a dream at all. And the worst part wasn't the voice itself. It was how normal it had felt to listen to it. I didn't wake up because of a sound, or the baby monitor crackling. I woke up because something shook me hard. One shoulder gripped and jolted, not once but twice, like someone trying to snap me out of a nightmare. I gasped and sat up, heart already hammering, confused and disoriented. My husband's side of the bed was empty. He was on night shift again. I reached over, expecting to find a blanket twisted up, maybe the dog, but there was nothing, just a cold, flat stretch of sheet. Then the silence hit me. Not quiet. Silence, the kind that presses on your ears. And in that vacuum, I knew what was wrong. The baby monitor was on, green light steady, but it wasn't picking up anything. No rustling, no breathing, no breathing. I flew out of bed barefoot, didn't care what I stepped on, just tore down the hall to the nursery. The door was cracked open just like I'd left it, and the nightlight spilled its soft blue haze across the crib. He was there, still, and too still, lips slightly parted but his chest wasn't moving. I didn't scream. I don't think I even breathed. I grabbed him and shook gently, then harder. His head lolled before I remembered the advice. Back flick, foot pat. I flipped him over. One slap, two, then a choking gasp, then a cry. His arms stiffened and jerked. His little face bloomed red with effort. I crumpled to the floor with him, sobbing, rocking, whispering that he was okay. That he was safe, even though my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't move from that spot until dawn started bleeding into the sky outside. After that night, I couldn't sleep properly. I kept the monitor volume up high. We even bought a motion sensor mat for the crib. But the night terrors weren't over. It started with the elephant. It was one of those plastic push-button toys, shaped like a circus elephant. Hit the trunk, it plays tinny music. My aunt gave it to us, said it was vintage, which just meant old and loud. We kept it off, stowed in the bottom of the toy chest with the batteries removed. Yet twice, sometimes 3 times a week, that awful jingle would play in the dead of night. Always the same tune, always from the nursery. At first I thought it was a neighbor's toy bleeding through the walls. Then I went in one night while it was playing. The elephant sat in the middle of the floor, rocking slightly as if just nudged. No one else was home. Then came the animals. Our cat Mischief used to sleep on the windowsill in the nursery. After that first night, she stopped crossing the threshold. She'd sit outside the door, tail twitching, staring into the room with that locked-on predator focus. Our dog Murphy followed suit, ears pinned, growling low in his throat at what looked like empty space. We tried everything: cleansing sprays, sleep consultants, even a friend of a friend who called herself a spiritual hygienist. She walked the house with a bowl of smoking herbs, muttering under her breath, but none of it made a dent. What did change things quietly, subtly, was my shift in perspective. One night, a few weeks after the elephant started playing on its own, I walked past the nursery door and paused. The monitor hadn't gone off. The baby wasn't fussing, but something pulled me there. I peeked in. And the mobile above the crib was spinning gently, even though the windows were shut and the fan was off. My son was asleep, face peaceful, his chest rising and falling in the rhythm. I now checked like clockwork. Then, behind me on the baby monitor receiver in the hallway, I heard the static pop once, then a click, then silence. I didn't feel afraid, just watched him sleep. That's when I let the idea settle, the one I'd pushed away since the shaking woke me that first night. Something was watching over him. I couldn't prove it. I couldn't name it, but it was there, not haunting us, protecting him, alert, constant watching. The animals eventually stopped growling. The toy jingle faded to rare occurrences, then none. But the sensation, the weight of attention never left. It wasn't oppressive. It was vigilant. Every now and then when I wake before dawn and tiptoe in to check on him, I'll find the rocking chair gently moving. Not enough to stir air, just enough to remind me something is still here, and whatever it is, it's not letting him go without a fight. The smell came back the first night we returned from the hospital. Not sharp like rot, but sour and old, like mold hidden behind walls, or something long wet left to dry. It had vanished for a few weeks, long enough that I almost convinced myself it had just been the drain in the bathroom, or the carpet near the kitchen we could never quite dry after that pipe burst in January. But that night, walking into the living room with the baby still sleeping in his carrier, I felt it hit the back of my throat. And the cold. A different cold. Not from the weather, though. The outside air was sharp, but a chill that crawled up from the floorboards. I looked at the thermostat, still set to 71, still humming. I didn't say anything to Aaron when he carried in the diaper bag, just watched his face when he stepped over the threshold. He paused for a second too long, like he'd walked into a room where someone had just been arguing. He glanced around, adjusted the bag strap on his shoulder, and didn't comment. The baby stirred that night around 2:30. I was the one who got up. The hallway was dark, and for a split second I thought I saw movement at the end, near the front door. Just a shadow, quick and low, like a cat. But we don't have pets. I blinked, and it was gone. The house wasn't new. It was an older duplex in a quiet part of the city. We'd moved in just before the birth, thinking it would be temporary, a stepping stone between our tiny one-bedroom and something better, something ours. The landlord had painted everything that flat rental beige, but you could still see the darker shades under the stairs if you looked close. I'd asked about the history when we signed. He shrugged, said something vague about turnover. What changed everything was my mom's fall, a bad one. Her hip broke, and there was no question we had to take her in. She moved into the downstairs bedroom in early March. That's when things really started. First were the drafts. Cold air that seeped in from no visible source. You'd be sitting at the table and suddenly your ankles felt like they were dipped in ice water. My mom complained constantly. She said she heard whispering at night, low and wet, like someone talking into a glass. We chalked it up to the medication. She'd had a concussion too. I started finding the baby monitor flipped. Just turned over, face down, in the crib. I assumed I was doing it half asleep. Aaron said it was probably the baby kicking it, but he wasn't rolling yet. One night, just after midnight, I stepped out back to take the trash down the stairs. It was raining lightly, and the wooden steps were slick. I slipped 2 from the bottom and hit the concrete hard. I remember the sharp crack of my wrist before the pain. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. When I looked up, the back porch light flickered, then went out. The door slammed shut behind me. I couldn't get it open. The knob turned, but the latch wouldn't budge. I called for Aaron, but my voice felt swallowed by the air. It took nearly 20 minutes for him to hear me through the window and come around. He said the door opened right away when he tried. I held my arm against my chest and told him not to leave it unlocked again. But I'd unlocked it myself on the way out. After that, I started keeping track. Small notes in a journal. Times, temperatures, smells. When my mom said she saw someone standing in her doorway, I marked it. When I found the baby's pacifier frozen solid one morning, frozen inside the house, I noted the date. The pediatrician said the baby's sleep issues were normal, but he'd started waking in terror, stiff and silent, eyes darting like he couldn't find the edge of the room. Not crying, just awake, watching. The tension between me and Aaron grew sharp. He wanted to move, said it wasn't worth it, even if we broke the lease. I couldn't imagine doing that to my mom. She needed care. The house was already adapted for her chair. Moving again meant another upheaval. But the longer she stayed, the worse it got. I found scratches under her bed, deep ones, parallel etched into the wood floor beneath the frame. She hadn't moved the bed, couldn't have. I showed Aaron. He didn't say anything for a long while. Then he said, quietly, that we should just wait it out, that her PT was improving, that maybe by summer she'd be strong enough to go back to her place. She passed in late June, peacefully, in her sleep. The coroner said it was her heart. Nothing unexpected, but that night the house was so quiet I couldn't sleep. I waited for the smell to return, waited for the cold. Nothing came. The baby slept 6 hours straight for the first time. Aaron stayed up late that night checking the locks. He didn't say why. The next morning he made coffee before I got up. He was whistling in the kitchen. The thermostat held steady. The light in the stairwell no longer flickered. In the weeks that followed, there were no more sounds, no more cold drafts. The baby monitor stayed upright. I tossed the notebook. Aaron asked if I ever wanted to talk about it. I told him no, that it was just stress, the transition, the grief. But I still flinch when the air goes still, and sometimes I find myself holding my breath at the bottom of the stairs, waiting for something to change again. It started with the quiet beep of the elevator arriving on the 3rd floor. I'd taken the stairs up like I always did, mostly out of habit. Hospitals make me jittery. Something about their stillness, how life and death share the same sterile corridors. That day, though, the air had a different weight to it, like someone had just whispered something I hadn't quite caught. My mother was in recovery, post-op, and I was visiting during the day while my brother handled the night shifts. I liked to be there before lunch, when the halls were full of movement and the nurses were less tense. Her room was 317, just a few doors down from the elevators. I'd stopped earlier at the small lounge near the nurses' station for a coffee that tasted faintly of burnt plastic, and that's where I'd run into Harold. He was sitting by the window, staring out like he was waiting for something or someone. I knew him from the waiting area. His daughter was in the same ward. He was the kind of man who always had a kind word, a dry joke, and the exhausted courtesy of someone who'd spent too many days in too many hospitals. He looked up as I passed and we exchanged a few words. I don't remember exactly what he said. Something about the weather, sunlight fighting through overcast skies, a day too bright to match the mood inside. I remember him standing up, patting his coat like he'd misplaced something. Then he nodded to me, half distracted, and wandered toward the vending machines. I figured I'd see him again when I came back through. But as I reached the elevators to head up another floor, I'd left my book in the family lounge. I saw a man step out as the doors parted. He looked around puzzled and asked, "Do you know what all that commotion is near 317? Something's wrong down there." I didn't recognize him, but the look in his eyes unsettled me. Half worried, half confused, like he was seeing the scene from a step behind time. I brushed past him, instinct taking over, and hurried down the hall. At first, everything looked normal. Then I saw the nurse sprinting. Not fast like in emergencies. Faster. Panicked. She turned sharply into 319, and by the time I reached the door, 2 more nurses were already inside. Someone was crying. That low, wordless kind of sound that tells you everything at once. I lingered in the hallway, unsure whether to step in or back away. A doctor brushed past me, not stopping. I couldn't see much, just a bare foot angled unnaturally, just beyond the curtain, and a tray of unused instruments. I looked back toward the elevator. Empty. No sign of the man who just exited. I stayed there until the hallway cleared. The crying had stopped, but a nurse was still sitting outside the door, wiping her face with her sleeve. I asked who it was, hesitating even as I said the words. "Harold Meyer," she told me. My stomach dropped. "That can't be right," I said. "I just spoke to him 10 minutes ago. He was sitting by the lounge." She blinked at me, like she couldn't decide if I was joking. "No," she said slowly. "He collapsed during rounds earlier this morning. We tried everything. He never regained consciousness." I stood there, staring at her. I hadn't imagined the conversation. His coat had a rip near the pocket. I'd noticed it when he patted himself down. There'd been a candy wrapper on the floor near his chair. The coffee machine had beeped when he walked past. I went back to the lounge. The wrapper was gone. His seat was empty. Nobody else remembered seeing him there. I didn't say anything to my mother. She was too tired to notice how quiet I'd become. But I stopped taking the stairs after that. I couldn't bear to walk past that spot, not because I was scared of seeing him again, but because I wasn't sure I wouldn't. The elevator, though, every time the doors opened, I found myself bracing, listening, waiting for someone to ask me if I knew what the commotion was this time. I was 6 the first time I told my parents about it, though at the time I had no idea what I was really saying. We were sitting around the old oak table in my grandparents' kitchen, the same one that had stood there since the 70s, worn smooth at the corners by generations of elbows and cereal bowls. I remember it was broad daylight, mid-afternoon. Sunlight spilled through the sliding glass door, making little rainbows on the floor where it hit the beveled glass. That's when I said something that made both my parents stop cold. I told them about the red plaid shirt my dad had worn that day. I told them how he'd stood near the hallway, arms crossed, right foot angled on its side, his expression tight like he was waiting for someone to finish what they were saying. I even told them how the sleeves were rolled to the elbow, one higher than the other, like he'd done it in a hurry. I mentioned the soft hiss of the kettle on the stove, the faint smell of pine from the plug-in air freshener. I spoke like someone recalling something they'd witnessed just the week before. But here's the thing. I wasn't alive then. Not yet. Not even close. My mother blinked at me for a long time, then smiled in that gentle, uncertain way parents do when they think their child is making things up. But my father's face went still. He looked at me, then at my mother, and slowly leaned back in his chair. That shirt, that exact one. He hadn't owned it in nearly 30 years. He'd bought it for Christmas in '83, when he and my mom had only been dating a few months. He used to wear it whenever he visited her parents' place because he thought it made him look less like a metalhead, his words. That was the day he asked her father if he could marry her. There were no photos from that visit, no video, no surviving home footage of any kind. I know because I spent the next 2 decades trying to find one. At first, I didn't think much of it. Kids say strange things all the time. But I wasn't a fanciful kid. If anything, I was painfully logical, always asking how things worked. always demanding proof. I would spend hours at the library reading science books and encyclopedias, lining up facts like little soldiers. By the time I was a teenager, I'd chalk the whole thing up to some odd coincidence. Maybe I'd overheard someone mention it. Maybe my brain had constructed a memory out of scattered sensory input. Then I found myself thinking about it again in college, late one night in the dorms. After a class on consciousness and memory, the professor had explained how memories aren't recordings, they're reconstructions. That each time we recall something, we're essentially rewriting it. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. I started digging. My grandparents' home was still standing then, still holding its breath under the weight of old time. I returned there the summer after I graduated. The same curtains were in the windows, though they were thinner now, and the scent of pine had been replaced by something drier. Dust, paper, and old air. I walked through the kitchen, down the hallway. I stood in the exact place I'd described from that memory. I could still see it. My father leaning there, plaid shirt wrinkled at the cuff, the late afternoon light just catching his shoulder. The kitchen was bright again, just like it had been that day, except it shouldn't have been my memory. I wasn't born for another 4 years. When I asked my father about it again, he was quiet. He didn't try to joke or dismiss it. He confirmed everything, down to the rolled sleeves and the look on his face. He said he'd been nervous. My grandfather hadn't liked him at first. That day, he'd stood there listening while my mother made the case for him. And all of it, every detail matched what I had described years ago, before I could have possibly known it. So I did what any obsessive skeptic would do. I hunted. I combed through every family VHS tape, every photo album, every shoebox of curled-edge prints. Nothing. I called relatives. I posted in forums. I asked my mother if maybe someone had told me about it as a child. Maybe in passing. She swore no one ever had. There's no record of it, no logical way I could have seen it. And yet the memory remains vivid, sensory, anchored in my mind like any other real event. I've turned it over 1,000 times, each rotation stripping away a little more of my certainty. I tell myself there has to be a rational explanation. That's what I do. That's what I believe. But when I stand in that hallway, when I feel the air shift in that old house, when the light hits just so, and I remember a version of my father who didn't know I would one day exist, I can't help but wonder. It feels less like something I remembered, and more like something that remembered me first. It started with the spoon. I was 11 when my family moved into that beige rental near the edge of town, 3rd floor unit, one rickety balcony, and a crooked laminate countertop that felt sticky no matter how many times my mom wiped it. We didn't expect much. It was just supposed to be temporary, while Dad sorted out some work stuff. 3 months, tops. We'd barely been there a week when I noticed it. A small bone-handled spoon Mom kept on the table next to the salt shaker. She said it was from her grandmother, and though it wasn't fancy, she never let anyone use it. It vanished one evening after dinner. I remembered staring at that empty space the next morning, confused. No one had moved it. We all assumed it got accidentally scooped into the trash. But 4 days later, I came out for breakfast and found it sitting right where it used to be, angled slightly to the left, handle pointing toward the sink. Same faint stain on the bowl of it. No one said a word, just stared. Then my dad forced a chuckle and blamed it on stress. But that was just the start. At night, I started waking to sounds I couldn't place. Quick, sharp pattering like someone running barefoot across the linoleum, stopping then darting again. It happened after midnight, always when the apartment was dead quiet. I'd hold my breath and listen from the top bunk, and more than once I heard a faint skittering beneath me, under the floorboards or in the walls. My sister heard it too. She slept in the bottom bunk, and one morning she asked if I'd been playing a game after lights out. She thought I was hiding and tapping on the floor. I hadn't moved. One night, I crept out and sat in the hallway in the dark, just listening. From the kitchen came a strange chewing sound, wet, muffled like someone eating with their mouth open and trying not to be heard. It went on for maybe 30 seconds. When I finally switched on the light, the room was empty, but the pantry door was open, and a single packet of crackers was torn open on the counter. My mom started locking the pantry. The fear didn't come all at once. It dripped in slowly, settling into the corners of our lives. Small things moved. A marble I'd left on the windowsill ended up under my pillow. A half-full glass of juice appeared on the bathroom sink when no one remembered pouring it. My dad blamed us kids, said we were playing tricks, but I could see it in his eyes. He didn't believe that. Not really. Then came the paper. It started as a project from school. We were asked to make a protective charm based on something from folklore. I chose a simple folded triangle from an old storybook and drew a black eye in the center with a red circle around it. I left it on my nightstand after the assignment, not thinking much about it. 2 days later, I found it tucked behind the toaster. I threw it out. It came back. Next morning, there it was, folded just the same, smudged with a bit of something dark like old coffee grounds back on my nightstand. I tore it in half and tossed it in the dumpster. It returned. Every time I destroyed it, it came back. My mom asked me to stop messing around, said it was disrespectful to the energy of the house. She'd started sleeping with a cross under her pillow. Dad stayed quiet more and more. On our last night there, we tried to act normal, ate dinner together. No one mentioned the cold spot that had settled near the fridge. No one acknowledged the scraping noise from the hallway just after we turned off the lights. I didn't sleep. I sat up and stared at the door. Around 2:30 a.m., I heard the faint pattering again. Closer this time. I pressed my back to the wall and held my breath. Something brushed against the edge of my mattress, paused, then moved on. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just waited. In the morning, the triangle paper was gone. We moved out that afternoon, left behind a few dishes and a laundry basket. Dad didn't even do a final walkthrough. We just locked the door and drove off. We never talked about it again, but sometimes, if I stay in a place too long, I start to hear those same small footsteps. I still check my nightstand every morning. The spoon sits in a box in our attic now. No one wants to touch it. I woke up with my hand pressed flat against the wall. The room was pitch black, not the kind of darkness that settles in after lights out, but something deeper, heavier. How my arm was fully extended, fingers spread wide against the cool plaster, as if I'd been searching mid-dream or mid-command for something buried inside it. I had no memory of reaching out, no awareness of what I might have hoped to touch. My other arm was twisted in the sheets, body half off the mattress. I wasn't scared. Not yet, just caught in the quiet confusion that follows an incomplete awakening. Eli was still asleep beside me, his breathing soft and even. Nothing about the room had changed. Same antique dresser, same ornate moldings, same overlong velvet curtains brushing the floor. The place had history. You could feel it in the bones of the floorboards, but it was dressed up now. A boutique renovation. Our room had a name, not a number. The East Turret Suite. We'd picked it for the novelty, the romance, a 2-night stay in a centuries-old manor that once belonged to a shipping family. High ceilings, original windows, and according to the framed brochure on the desk, a quiet charm best appreciated by moonlight. It was our first night, or had been. I lowered my hand from the wall and wiped it on my thigh. There was dust, not thick but present, powdery, fine. I stared at my fingers for a while before lying back down. I didn't sleep well after that. The morning passed with only a passing mention. I told Eli and he laughed, assuming I'd had some sort of half-dream, sleep paralysis maybe. Haunted by drywall, he joked, pouring coffee from the silver carafe on the breakfast terrace. I let it go. But the second night changed things. It was around 3 a.m. when I woke again. This time there was no odd posture, no outstretched limb, just a sudden return to full awareness. like surfacing from deep underwater. I kept still, ears straining against the dark. Eli was asleep again, turned toward the window, and then it came. The sound. A slow, deliberate scrape above us. Not in the walls, overhead. It wasn't random. It had weight. A long drag, like furniture moving across a wooden floor. I blinked into the black, willing myself to believe it was some ordinary creak, old house quirks. But then it happened again, and again. I didn't move. The ceiling, barely visible in the faint light, felt impossibly close. I had the sensation clear, precise of being watched. Not from the corners or the door, but from above. Directly above, that pressure of presence. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours. When the sun finally rose, we dressed quickly. I waited until we were halfway through the lobby before stopping at the desk. A different woman was on shift, mid-50s, polite but efficient. "Is anyone staying in the room above ours?" I asked. She tapped on the keyboard. "You're on the top floor," she said with a smile. "And the attic?" Her smile faltered just slightly. "That's sealed," she said. "Used for storage during the renovation, but not anymore. No one's been up there in years." Eli said nothing until we were outside. That night, we stayed anyway. We'd already paid. Logic over fear. I wish we hadn't. The scraping returned just after 3. Louder, closer, then a pause, followed by a new sound, softer but worse. A shuffling, directly above the bed, like someone adjusting their weight. I reached out and shook Eli. He woke immediately, listening. He whispered, "I feel like someone's in the room." We turned on the light, empty of course, but the sense didn't go away. We sat up for the rest of the night, backs against the headboard. Neither of us wanted to speak. We just waited for the dawn. We left before checkout. No goodbye, no breakfast. I didn't care about the cancellation policy. 2 days later, after we were home, I unpacked my bag and found a smear of the same pale dust on the inside lining. I hadn't worn that jacket the second night, and I still don't remember moving that first night. I don't know what part of me decided to reach for that wall, but I think something else did. Something that lives just above the ceiling of a room no one uses anymore. That place wasn't quiet. It was waiting. It started with the dreams, short, broken things that ended with me sitting bolt upright in bed, sweat cooling on my back, unsure whether the image of the woman in the hallway was from sleep or memory. At first, I dismissed it. Stress, probably. The move had been rushed and the condo still smelled faintly of fresh paint and someone else's air freshener. But then came the morning I found my keys in the freezer and a half-eaten apple on the windowsill. Things I didn't remember doing. I laughed about it with Carly over coffee, but something was off in the way she looked at me, like she was trying to measure how serious I was. It got worse. There was a stretch, 4 days maybe, where I'd look at the clock and realize hours had passed. Whole conversations would happen that I couldn't recall. Carl said I'd become cold, mechanical. My voice would change slightly. My eyes didn't track the way they normally did. She said she saw me standing by the bedroom mirror one night, just staring at it, not moving for 20 minutes. I told her she must have been half asleep. I wish I'd believed that. The bedroom mirror was old. I'd picked it up at an antique shop before moving in. Something about the frame caught my eye. Carved walnut, smooth to the touch but warped ever so slightly. Like heat had once bent it. It didn't seem remarkable at the time, just a mirror. But then came the photo. Carly had taken it while I was out, just snapping shots of the space to send to a friend. In one of them, she caught the hallway behind her, reflected in the mirror, and there was someone standing in the doorway of my room. A dark figure, blurred at the edges but clearly watching. No one had been there. She'd been alone. We sat with that photo between us for a long time. The figure was tall, wrong in its proportions, and just looking in. That night, I woke with a sharp pain along my spine. I had 3 narrow, raw marks running down my back, No blood, just the sensation of something having scraped along me while I slept. Kirkley insisted we needed help, not just a therapist or sleep specialist. She had a friend who knew someone who dealt in less conventional matters. Enter the consultant. He wouldn't give a name, just ask questions in a slow, deliberate voice. He didn't flinch when we told him about the mirror or the figure. Instead, he asked if there had been any reflective surfaces brought into the condo recently. When I told him about the mirror, he asked if I had ever felt like it was looking back. We covered the mirror that night in an old wool blanket, nailed around the frame, completely blacking it out. And the lights died instantly. Not the whole condo, just the bedroom. The bulbs in the ceiling fixture hissed and went out in unison. Carly's phone, which had been charging on the nightstand, went black. Her flashlight app wouldn't even open, only in that room. We left it and slept in the living room, both of us pretending we weren't afraid to speak out loud. By morning, the lights were back. The phone worked, but the mirror stayed covered. That's when the priest came. Not our idea. The consultant sent him. A young man, quiet but determined, who walked through the condo with a small brass censer and murmured prayers under his breath. He paused at the bedroom doorway and wouldn't step inside until I had relit the candle he handed me. Whatever had taken hold had not started with the mirror, he explained, but the mirror had become a focus, a point of convergence. He asked if I had ever encountered anything before. I couldn't answer. I wanted to say no, but something in me, something smaller and quieter, knew better. This wasn't new, this was old. I just hadn't remembered it until now. He performed the cleansing late that night. Carly wasn't there. She said she couldn't handle being in the condo another night. I didn't blame her. The ritual was quiet. No dramatics, just smoke, whispered prayer, and a feeling like pressure building behind my eyes. I remember clutching the sides of the armchair and feeling the room get darker even with the lights on. At one point, I thought I heard the sound of nails dragging across glass, faint and from the bedroom, but I didn't go check. When it was over, the priest told me I needed to keep the mirror covered for 7 days. After that, if nothing else happened, I could decide whether to remove it or get rid of it entirely. I didn't last that long. On the 4th day, I took it out to the storage unit beneath the building, locked it inside, and walked away. I took it out to the storage unit beneath the building, locked it inside, and walked away. Things got better. The gaps in time stopped. The strange marks faded. Carly and I spoke again, hesitant, cautious, but willing to try. I kept the lights on at night for a while, just in case. Weeks later, I went down to the storage unit to check on something else. The mirror was still there, but the blanket had slipped just a little, enough for me to see my own reflection staring back from the dark. Except I wasn't looking at the mirror when I saw it. I was looking just to the side, and the reflection was still looking straight at me. It started with the dreams, short broken things, that ended with me sitting bolt upright in bed, sweat cooling on my back, unsure whether the image of the woman in the hallway was from sleep or memory. At first I dismissed it. Stress, probably. The move had been rushed, and the condo still smelled faintly of fresh paint and someone else's air freshener. But then came the morning I found my keys in the freezer and a half-eaten apple on the windowsill. Things I didn't remember doing. I laughed about it with Carly over coffee. But something was off in the way she looked at me, like she was trying to measure how serious I was. It got worse. There was a stretch, 4 days maybe, where I'd look at the clock and realize hours had passed. Whole conversations would happen that I couldn't recall. Carly said I'd become cold, mechanical. My voice would change slightly. My eyes didn't track the way they normally did. She said she saw me standing by the bedroom mirror one night, just staring at it, not moving for 20 minutes. I told her she must have been half asleep. I wish I'd believed that. The bedroom mirror was old. I'd picked it up at an antique shop before moving in. Something about the frame caught my eye. Carved walnut, smooth to the touch but warped ever so slightly, like heat had once bent it. It didn't seem remarkable at the time. Just a mirror. But then came the photo. Carly had taken it while I was out, just snapping shots of the space to send to a friend. In one of them, she caught the hallway behind her, reflected in the mirror, and there was someone standing in the doorway of my room, a dark figure, blurred at the edges but clearly watching. No one had been there. She'd been alone. We sat with that photo between us for a long time. The figure was tall, wrong in its proportions, and just looking in. That night, I woke with a sharp pain along my spine. I had 3 narrow, raw marks running down my back. No blood, just the sensation of something having scraped along me while I slept. Carly insisted we needed help, not just a therapist or sleep specialist. She had a friend who knew someone who dealt in less conventional matters. Enter the consultant. He wouldn't give a name, just asked questions in a slow, deliberate voice. He didn't flinch when we told him about the mirror or the figure. Instead, he asked if there had been any reflective surfaces brought into the condo recently. When I told him about the mirror, he asked if I had ever felt like it was looking back. We covered the mirror that night, an old wool blanket nailed around the frame, completely blacking it out, and the lights died instantly. Not the whole condo, just the bedroom. The bulbs in the ceiling fixture hissed and went out in unison. Carly's phone, which had been charging on the nightstand, went black. Her flashlight app wouldn't even open. Only in that room. We left it and slept in the living room, both of us pretending we weren't afraid to speak out loud. By morning, the lights were back. The phone worked, but the mirror stayed covered. That's when the priest came. Not our idea. The consultant sent him. A young man, quiet but determined, who walked through the condo with a small brass censer and murmured prayers under his breath. He paused at the bedroom doorway and wouldn't step inside until I had relit the candle he handed me. Whatever had taken hold had not started with the mirror, he explained, but the mirror had become a focus, a point of convergence. He asked if I had ever encountered anything before. I couldn't answer. I wanted to say no, but something in me, something smaller and quieter, knew better. This wasn't new. This was old. I just hadn't remembered it until now. He performed the cleansing late that night. Carly wasn't there. She said she couldn't handle being in the condo another night. I didn't blame her. The ritual was quiet, no dramatics, just smoke, whispered prayer, and a feeling like pressure building behind my eyes. I remember clutching the sides of the armchair and feeling the room get darker even with the lights on. At one point, I thought I heard the sound of nails dragging across glass, faint and from the bedroom, but I didn't go check. When it was over, the priest told me I needed to keep the mirror covered for 7 days. After that, if nothing else happened, I could decide whether to remove it or get rid of it entirely. I didn't last that long. On the 4th day, I took it out to the storage unit beneath the building, locked it inside, and walked away. Things got better. The gaps in time stopped. The strange marks faded. Carly and I spoke again, hesitant, cautious, but willing to try. I kept the lights on at night for a while, just in case. Weeks later, I went down to the storage unit to check on something else. The mirror was still there, but the blanket had slipped. Just a little, enough for me to see my own reflection, staring back from the dark. Except I wasn't looking at the mirror when I saw it. I was looking just to the side, and the reflection was still looking straight at me. I never expected to miss that house. When we moved, I told myself I'd feel lighter, freer. But that first night in the new apartment, the silence wrapped around me like a vacuum. No creaks, no knocks, no disembodied voices. Just me, the hum of the fridge, and a hollow ache that caught me off guard. The old place had always been strange. Doors opened on their own, lights flickered in patterns too consistent to blame on faulty wiring, and cold spots would drift through the hallway regardless of the season. At first it terrified me. Then it intrigued me, and eventually I formed some twisted kind of bond with it. It wasn't just a haunted house. It was my haunted house. I started recording things after the 3rd year audio, mostly. I didn't tell my partner right away. He preferred to ignore it all, brushing things off with a shrug or a joke, but I couldn't. I felt watched when I was alone, and not in a threatening way, more like something wanted me to know it was there, a quiet witness to my daily routine, a presence I grew used to. Over time, I started speaking to it, just small things, good morning or I'll be back later. It felt rude not to. I even caught myself pausing before locking the door, waiting for a reply I'd never hear, but it was the silence that felt off. The noises, the cold drafts, the occasional whisper, those became normal. When we finally packed up and moved a job change, better rent, more space, I thought I'd feel excited, but as I stood in the empty living room, I felt a pressure in my chest I couldn't explain. My friend who had helped us box everything up pulled me aside before we left. She confessed she'd whispered thank you and goodbye to the walls, said it just felt right. I hadn't even told her I did the same. The new place was clean, and still, too still. At night, I'd lie awake waiting for the floor to creak under unseen steps, for a curtain to flutter without cause. But nothing came. Then, about a month in, I started recording again. I don't know why. Habit, maybe. Or hope. One morning, I played back a clip I'd recorded during a late-night writing session. I nearly dropped my coffee. There, layered beneath my own keystrokes and breathing, was the softest whisper, just a hum at first, then words. My name, clear, deliberate. I didn't show it to my partner. He didn't need to know. I just sat there, alone in the apartment we'd called normal, listening to that recording over and over, not afraid, just comforted. Something had followed me, or maybe it had always been part of me. Since then, it's been subtle. A knock here, a shift in air pressure there. Nothing like before. Whatever it is, it's quieter now, respectful, like it knows I needed space. Sometimes I wonder if it's truly the same presence, if it really followed me, or if the years I spent in that house rewired something inside me, made me receptive in a way I hadn't been before. Either way, I'm not alone. Not really. And I don't feel sad anymore. Not like I did at first. Now the silence isn't empty, it's waiting, patient, like an old friend keeping its distance until I'm ready to say hello again. The cold cut deeper than I expected that night. We'd all signed up for a quiet winter getaway, just me, Cassie, and 4 close friends, hoping the remoteness of the rental cabin would melt the burnout we'd been dragging through the last months of the year. The place had good reviews, even a fireplace and a game room, but from the moment we stepped inside, something felt wrong. It wasn't dramatic, just a tension in the air, like walking into a room where someone's been fighting. The cabin was tucked into a hollow in the hills, surrounded by bare trees that clawed at the windows when the wind kicked up. It looked nice enough, pine beams over-decorated in fake rustic charm, but there was something about the stairs, steep, dark, too narrow, tucked between the kitchen and the wall like an afterthought. The shadows there always looked just a little too deep, even when the light was on. It started with a sound. That first night, around midnight, we were all hanging out in the lounge cards, drinks, music, soft in the background, when something knocked against the wood floor in the hallway. Not loud, just sharp, like a ball bouncing once and coming to a stop. We all heard it. Cassie glanced over her shoulder. We found it lying by the bottom stair, a red rubber ball one of us had brought for a party game, but no one had touched it that evening. No doors open, no draft, just the ball sitting in the middle of the floor like it had been thrown from nowhere. I said it must have rolled, even though the floor was flat and I couldn't explain how. It was easier than admitting how fast my pulse had jumped. The next night, something changed. Cassie and I were already in bed, the house mostly quiet, when I thought I heard movement. Not footsteps exactly, more like a shift of weight on old wood. I sat up. It was coming from the staircase, slow, measured, one step at a time. But when I opened the door to the hall, there was no one there. I didn't tell anyone in the morning. Ray got there first. She looked pale, like she hadn't slept, said she'd seen something at the end of her bed, a figure, blacker than the dark around it. She hadn't moved, just watched it, then it was gone. Jen tried to comfort her. I stayed quiet. The others didn't. No jokes, no skepticism, just silence. On the third night it got colder. We heard the windows creak in their frames. Everyone was on edge. That's when the first balloon deflated. It was one of those oversized foil numbers we'd taped to the lounge wall for Marcus's birthday. Fully inflated when we walked into the room, sagging like a collapsed lung. Seconds later, no hiss, no pop, just sudden silent deflation. We all saw it. No one said anything for a moment. Then Owen cracked a joke, but it died halfway out of his mouth. Another balloon went down while we were brushing our teeth. We heard it in the other room, just a flat crumpling sound. Ray jumped. Cassie grabbed my hand. I didn't say it out loud, but in that moment, I gave up the last thread of my skepticism. No one wanted to go upstairs alone anymore. Even Marcus, who usually laughed this kind of stuff off, started turning lights on in every room he entered. Jen stopped unpacking her stuff at all. We were supposed to be there 5 nights. Everyone was ready to leave after 3. But snow had locked us in, and the roads were too dangerous to drive. That 4th night was the worst. No one slept. We all camped downstairs with the fire dying and the hallway behind us feeling darker by the minute. I sat on the edge of the couch trying not to listen, but I still heard it. The sound of movement on the stairs. Slow, intentional. Not footsteps exactly, just weight-shifting wood. One riser at a time. We all heard it. No one moved. Then it stopped, right at the bottom step. I didn't turn around. None of us did. We just waited. In the morning, the last balloon was down, fully flattened against the floor. We packed in silence. No one said goodbye. No one even locked the door behind us. That trip changed something in me. I still don't believe in ghosts. Not in the Hollywood sense, but I believe in places, in impressions, in things that wait. That cabin wasn't empty. Something was there with us, and it wasn't trying to hurt us. It was just watching, curious, patient. That winter weekend was supposed to be forgettable, a blip on the calendar. Instead, it's the one trip I can never shake. The first thing I noticed was the water. Not dripping, not a pipe issue. It was the soft mechanical hum click of the automatic pitcher in the kitchen, firing on its own at 2:43 a.m. I lived in a beat-up rental house a few blocks off campus with 3 roommates, and my girlfriend Lena, who'd been crashing with us since her lease fell through. The place was all scuffed baseboards and thrift store furniture. Ghost stories weren't exactly scarce around student housing, but I didn't buy into any of it. I was the rational one, the one who called out confirmation bias and explained away bumps in the night with physics or fatigue. The first time the pitcher went off, I figured someone had set it wrong or bumped it sleepwalking. The second time, I checked the programming disabled. I unplugged it completely. Still, it triggered again an hour later. That was the first week I began to feel like the house didn't want me sleeping. The hallway outside our room had always been a little darker than the rest of the place. Something about how the overhead light had a dimmer that never worked right. A few nights in, I left our door cracked to catch whoever might be trying to mess with me. I lay awake, ears tuned like radar. Around 3:30, a long shadow crossed the hallway. No footsteps, no creak of weight, just a shift in the light like someone sliding through a film reel. When I got up to check, every door was closed. Everyone was asleep. Lena rolled over and asked why I was pacing. By night 5, I locked the door. That's when the sound changed. It wasn't the mechanical worth the pitcher anymore. It was heavier. Something large scraping the floor slowly, like a piece of furniture being dragged across laminate. I sat up so fast I almost knocked the lamp off the nightstand. The sound came from just outside our door, then stopped dead. No retreat, no shuffle of feet, just silence so deep it pushed into my eardrums. I didn't open the door. The next morning, I noticed the hallway cabinet had been shifted, angled slightly toward our room, heavy enough that it would have taken effort to move it. I asked the others one by one. Mark didn't know what I was talking about. Jules hadn't left her room. Lena said she heard it too. I started documenting everything: times, sounds, light levels, possible airflow explanations. It wasn't about belief, it was about disproving the coincidence. My skepticism had structure, it had rituals, but that night broke them. I woke suddenly. No noise, no reason, just that feeling of being observed. I turned my head and saw something standing at the foot of our bed. It was tall, wrong tall. Its head nearly touched the ceiling. Its form was thick, like a person draped in curtains, broad-shouldered, arms straight down. The fabric or whatever covered it didn't reflect light. There was no shimmer, no glint, just matte blackness that seemed to pull the dark in tighter. It didn't move. I couldn't either. My lungs felt like they were trying to breathe through a wet towel. Lena lay still beside me, undisturbed. I blinked hard once, twice, and it was gone. The next morning, I found deep grooves in the laminate under the bookshelf. It had been pulled out 3 feet from the wall. No one admitted to touching it. From that point on, I didn't try to rationalize. I stopped writing in the notebook. I started sleeping with the hallway light on. The picture stayed unplugged, but it still made noise some nights. The dragging sounds never came back. That shape at the foot of the bed never returned, but the feeling did, that static charge in the air, like the house was still watching, waiting. I've stayed in older buildings since, visited actual haunted sites for the novelty of it. Nothing has ever come close to what happened in that house, and I've learned something I never thought I'd say. Some places don't want you to forget them. It was close to midnight, and the highway had emptied into silence. Just me, my partner Dean, and the steady hum of tires over asphalt. We were heading west, deep into the rural stretches that divide the townships, with nothing around us but an ocean of tall grass and low hills shadowed by moonlight. No trees, no buildings, no power lines, just openness in every direction. The sky was clear, black as ink except for the stars burning sharp overhead. Dean had the window cracked slightly, and the cool air kept me alert. I remember thinking how quiet it was, not just quiet, hushed, like the world was holding its breath. That's when I first felt it. Not saw, not heard, felt. A pressure, or maybe an awareness, like something vast had just entered the same space as us. Dean turned to me without saying anything. I could see it on his face. We both felt it, that sudden cold ripple of unease. No warning, no source, just there. And then it came. At first I thought it was a shooting star. Something bright sliced through the sky ahead of us, descending far too fast, but at an angle that felt deliberate, not like it was falling. More like it was aiming. A single white-blue point of light, sharp as a welder's arc, plunging toward the earth on a silent trajectory. I pulled the car over without thinking, skidding slightly on the shoulder. We stepped out, both staring at where it should have hit. But it hadn't. There was no impact, no glow, no crater. Just the night, unchanged. Then Dean shouted. He was pointing behind us straight back the way we'd come. The same object was there again, same size, same brightness, but now it was rising, fast, and not in a curve or arc like something bouncing or reversing course. It was moving in a perfectly straight line, straight up into the sky from the horizon behind us. It had vanished in front of us, and reappeared behind us, traveling in the opposite direction. I know what I saw. I can still picture the geometry of it. The way the air felt heavier, almost electric, during those few seconds. Dean didn't say much after that. Neither did I. We got back in the car, and the rest of the drive passed in silence. Later, I tried to reason it out. Military test, weather phenomenon, satellite debris. But none of it lined up. No object moves like that. Not without sound, not without inertia, not without explanation. That stretch of highway has a reputation. We found that out a week later when Dean looked it up. Locals call it the open mile. Strange lights, vanishing cars, time gaps. The kind of folklore you hear in small towns that don't bother writing things down. But I remember it. Clear as the cold air that night. I don't drink. Don't take anything. My memory doesn't bend. We saw something we weren't meant to see. Something fast, precise, and wrong. In a way I can't fully explain. It didn't feel like a mistake. It felt intentional, like it wanted to be seen, just once. I'd stayed in a lot of places over the years. Some weird, some unsettling, and a few that left me with stories I never quite knew how to tell. This one, though, has followed me like a cold breath down the back of my neck ever since. It was the kind of hotel that tried to look newer than it was. Beige walls scrubbed clean, patterned carpet that didn't quite mask the wear, the whiff of bleach always just under the scent of artificial lemon. It sat near a major transit hub, trains, buses, taxi ranks, and that meant a constant churn of tired travelers, including me and my partner Casey. We'd rolled in late, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, after a long delayed layover. I remember the way the fluorescent lights buzzed above the front desk, and how the clerk barely looked up as he handed over the key cards. Room 4112, 4th floor, end of the hallway, just past the vending machines. The elevator stuttered on the way up, jolting slightly like it was fighting gravity harder than it should. I had that low ache behind my eyes. Half jet lag, half nerves. Not fear exactly, just a familiar prickle I get in places that feel watched. It happens more often than I care to admit. Maybe it's my history, maybe it's how I'm wired. Either way, I usually keep it to myself. But the moment we stepped into that room, something coiled tight in my gut. It looked normal, neat, a bit too sterile maybe. Casey dropped their bag, kicked off their shoes and started fussing with the TV remote. I double-checked the door lock. One of those metal swing bars sat above the deadbolt, the kind meant to keep housekeeping out even if someone has a key. I latched it out of habit. We didn't talk much. We were both exhausted. After a shower and some channel surfing, the white noise of late-night infomercials lulling us, we turned off the lights. The blackout curtains dulled the city glow to a faint reddish smear. I lay on my back, staring into the dark, not quite able to sleep. It was the sound that woke me. Metal on metal, faint but unmistakable, like someone testing the door. I froze. My eyes snapped open. The room was still pitch black, except for the LED clock casting a red glow across the dresser. I held my breath. Another sound softer this time. The gentle, deliberate rattle of the swing bar. Not forceful, just enough to see if it would give. I sat up slowly. Casey murmured something but didn't wake. I stayed still, listening. The sound didn't come again. I told myself it could have been someone checking their own room by mistake. Happens all the time in these places. But I knew better. That sound, someone was testing it. Quietly. Carefully. I waited, heart thudding until the silence stretched too long. Then I slid out of bed, padded across the room and peered through the peephole. No one there. I stood for another minute, then turned away. And that's when I saw it out of the corner of my eye. A figure. Tall. Thin. Too tall. Peeking around the far corner of the hallway, half hidden by the wall near the vending machines. It didn't move like someone casually passing by. It didn't move at all. Just stood there, its head tilted slightly, like it was studying the door. My throat tightened, my whole body locked up, and then, without thinking, I said out loud, "I see you." The words snapped out of me, sharp and loud. The figure disappeared instantly, not walked away, gone. 1 second there, the next, nothing. The hallway was empty again. I stepped back fast, heart hammering, and rechecked the door. The swing bar was still in place. Deadbolt engaged. Nothing had gotten in. But I didn't go back to sleep. Neither did Casey. Once I told them, we stayed up until sunrise, lights on, curtains slightly parted so we could see the hallway through the peephole. Nothing returned, but that feeling that we'd been watched, studied, selected, it didn't go away. A few days later, I looked into the area. Turns out that stretch of land before the hotel was built had a long, ugly history. Fires, disappearances, even rumors of old structures beneath the current foundation. Some of it sounded like folklore, some of it didn't. We checked out that morning without incident, but I've never stayed near that hub again. I can still see it, how it leaned, how it waited, how it vanished the moment I acknowledged it. It started with a door frame that didn't want to come loose. We were nearly done for the day, just one more wall to bring down before we could wrap. The job was a full renovation on a tired 2-story home tucked into a quiet residential street. One of those slightly crooked houses with ivy fingers clinging to the siding and window panes that had long since given up sealing anything. My partner Eric and I had been working it for over a week. Nothing major had gone wrong, but something in the air had been bothering me since day one. The usual clatter of tools had a strange edge inside this house. Hammers echoed too long, like the sound had trouble leaving. Nails bent at odd angles as if the grain of the wood resisted them. Doors we removed would creak again at night from where we stacked them. And always this smell, not mildew, not rot, just wrong. Like the air was too old to breathe. Still, the money was good. The homeowner had moved out a year back and never returned, claiming she was done with the place. No explanation, just a signed check, and the freedom to gut it top to bottom. Around 5:30 that evening, we heard it, a sound neither of us could describe after, except to say it was wrong, like metal grinding inside a throat. It rose from under the floorboards and echoed through the frame of the house, freezing both of us mid-swing. Eric looked at me wide-eyed, pale, asking without asking if I'd heard it too. I had. We called it for the day. The next morning, our tools were scattered, not misplaced, thrown. My drill was lodged into the wall halfway across the room. Boxes of nails had exploded, tiny silver points buried in drywall and wood like shrapnel. Nothing was missing, but the site looked like it had been attacked. I tried to ground myself, remind myself that old houses settle, that rodents get bold, that neighborhood kids sneak in sometimes. But Eric was shaken. He pointed out that the work gloves he'd tucked into his belt had been found wedged into the attic vent. That would have taken a ladder and a crowbar to open. We should have walked, but we didn't. Instead, we picked up the tools and got back to work. Tense, eyes darting at every creak, every flicker of movement in our periphery. The deeper we went into the renovation, the worse it got. Sudden drafts would slam doors that hadn't moved in hours. Static buzzed in the air like a distant storm no one else could hear. I started getting nosebleeds whenever I entered the living room. Eric stopped using the bathroom in the house entirely. By Friday, something snapped. We were removing a load-bearing post that ran from the basement up through the main floor, the final piece in opening up the floor plan. I had just cut through the base when a boom like thunder rolled through the house. Every lightwork lamps, hallway bulbs, even the battery-powered lantern flared white and burst. Shards of hot glass peppered the floor. Tools leapt from their boxes. I saw the heavy pipe wrench fly 6 feet into the air and crash through the back window. The post I'd just cut groaned like a wounded animal. And then I saw it, just for a second, behind Eric, crouched in the space where the wall had been. A figure, impossibly thin, knees jutting at odd angles, face flat and long like it had been stretched. It wasn't moving. It was just there, watching. Eric didn't see it, but he knew. He turned toward me, lips bloodless, and said one word, "Go." We left everything behind. Tools, materials, even our phones. We didn't speak the entire drive back. That night, I couldn't sleep. My ears rang with the aftershock of that house. I called the homeowner the next morning and told her we'd need to finish the job fast or not at all. She didn't seem surprised. gave us permission to tear down whatever we needed, no questions asked, so long as we left the foundation intact. We went back with a crew of 5, kept the place as loud as we could, saws buzzing, music blasting from a worksite radio. We moved fast, no breaks, no solo trips into any room. The more we demolished, the quieter the house became. No more bursts of sound, no more flying tools, no more impossible figures at the edge of our vision. By the end of the second week, we were done, packed the last of the debris into the trailer, and didn't look back. I haven't driven down that street since. Neither has Eric, but sometimes I'll wake up with that sound in my ears again, that first scream from under the floor. And in those moments, I'm sure of one thing: that house didn't want to be opened, and it won't forget what we did to it. It started with a sound like nails dragging across the ceiling. Slow, deliberate, as if someone or something was pacing directly above our bed. But we lived in a 1-story log cabin, built well over 200 years ago, its roof just timber and air. That first night I stared up into the dark, listening to that scratchy shuffle shift to the far corner, then down along the wall, moving with purpose until it hovered right beneath the loft where I sometimes sat alone to read. The silence that followed felt more suffocating than the noise itself. I didn't wake my partner. He's not the kind to scare easily, and I didn't want to start sounding like the house had gotten into my head. But I felt it had. This place, this creaking, moss-veiled cabin, tucked into a woodlot at the edge of a forgotten road, had a presence. Not cold, not cruel, exactly, but watching. And I'd felt it from the first night we moved in. I started sleeping lightly, sometimes not at all. The noises didn't happen every night, just enough to make me doubt my memory. A shuffle, a tap, the groan of old wood under a weight that shouldn't be there. I told myself it was just the cabin settling. Animals in the walls, maybe. But then came the night I dreamed I was being watched from the ceiling itself. Not the roof, but the actual ceiling boards. Like my subconscious had placed eyes in the cracks above me. In the dream, a sharp, urgent pressure built behind my eyes. Like a voice without words was screaming at me to wake up. Now, I snapped awake, heart racing, and turned toward the old box fan by the window. It was already off. It had been running when I went to sleep. The plug was still in the wall. No power outage, just off. That was the first time I felt fear stronger than curiosity. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't even write it down. But that night, I moved to the small guest room at the back of the house. The sound didn't follow, not for a while. The silence was strange, almost like it was giving me space to doubt myself. For 3 years, the house played its game. Sometimes it was nothing but a creak. Other times it was the sound of pacing, just beyond the reach of my eyes. There was a particular tone the hallway boards would make. Hollow, sharp, whenever something walked the length between our bedroom and the kitchen. We both heard it once while watching TV. He froze. I muted the screen. We waited. Nothing came. I could see in his face the question he didn't want to ask, and I didn't force the conversation. One night, after months of little incidents building up, I spoke aloud to the house. It wasn't a ceremony. No candles or chants. I just stood in the living room and said very plainly, "I think you've made your point. I don't want to fight with you, but I want my home back. I need to sleep. Please go." It felt foolish, but I meant it. I didn't whisper it, and I didn't ask for anything else, just that I waited. Nothing happened. The next few nights were quiet. Then came the scratching. It started again from the ceiling, only now it was rhythmic, as if playing out on a timer. Every night, just before midnight, the sound would start a scrape, a knock, then silence, as if it were showing me that I'd been heard, and that it was choosing to stay anyway. But something had shifted. The house wasn't oppressive anymore. The sounds persisted for weeks, then became occasional. They never left completely, but they stopped waking me in the middle of the night. It was as if whatever was there respected that I had drawn a line, even if it didn't agree with it. My partner and I still live in that cabin. He knows more now, enough to believe me, though he hasn't had the same experiences. He says the house feels different now, warmer somehow, but I still sleep with one ear open. Every so often I hear it again, the slow, deliberate pacing above the ceiling, just enough to remind me it's there. I took the farm job thinking it would be simple. Feed the goats, patch the fences, stay in the old caretaker's house for 6 weeks. The property bordered a wide tract of forest preserve, miles of unbroken dark stretching right up to the back pasture. The owner left me with keys and a list, then drove off without another word. The first few nights were ordinary. Cold air, creaky floors, a steady hum of insects outside. But on the 4th evening, just after sundown, I saw something streak across the sky, a narrow line of white light, fast and silent, trailing no smoke, no sound. It cut over the ridge at the edge of the woods, and was gone in under a second. The animals in the barn went quiet. I stood outside for a long time, watching the dark return. Later that night, I sat in my truck with the radio off, trying to unwind. I'd parked facing the back fence. Nothing moved out there, just the shadows from the trees and the thin halo of the moon. Then came a sound behind me, a dry, dragging scrape against metal. I turned in my seat and waited. Another scrape, slower this time, as if something rough was being pulled along the rear panel. I threw the door open and stepped out, light in hand. The gravel was undisturbed, no footprints, nothing broken. Still, the sound had been close. Too close to ignore. I tried not to think about it. Maybe it was an old branch, a loose wire. But the next night I heard footsteps, not quick or panicked. These were deliberate, heavy, uneven. They circled the house just past the window line, pausing sometimes as if listening. I never saw what made them. I only heard the crunch of dry grass and the occasional knock against the siding, like something brushing past too close. I didn't sleep much after that. Then, one night, everything stopped. The frogs, the crickets, the wind in the eaves gone. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, holding my breath, waiting for some signal that it was just a momentary pause. That's when the floor shifted. A single solid impact hit beneath my feet, as if something massive had struck the house from below. The shock knocked my coffee from the counter. A framed photo fell and shattered. But outside, it was still silence. The owner didn't believe me when I asked if the place had history. Just an old house, he said. But I stopped going near the rear pasture. I started locking the doors in the middle of the day, keeping the curtains drawn even when the sun was out. I left the job 2 weeks early. I still don't know what I saw or what followed me in those final nights. But I haven't been able to shake the feeling that the house, something in or around it, knew I was there. It watched, it waited, and the worst part is, nothing ever showed itself. Just the sound, the silence, the weight of something real and hidden, pressing in until I couldn't breathe. I never went back, I couldn't. That house is still out there, empty now, resting on the edge of the woods. Sometimes when I close my eyes at night, I hear that same slow scraping behind me, patient and exact, like it's still circling the walls I can't quite leave behind. I never liked sleeping in basements. Too many corners, too much quiet. But rent was cheap and the landlord had converted the lower level into a separate unit. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, and a wide open living area where the concrete walls still carried that faint cold smell, even after paint. The first night, nothing felt off. I tested all the motion sensors, set the security camera facing the stairwell, and checked the deadbolt twice. The Wi-Fi was spotty down there, so I rerouted the mesh node closer to the bedroom door. That was Friday. Saturday night, sometime after 2 a.m., I woke up with the distinct feeling someone was in the room. Not footsteps, not a creak, just a presence. Still wrong, like a misplaced shape in a mirror. I sat up slowly, The room was pitch black except for the faint green glow from my surge protector near the floor. There was something standing near the foot of the bed, not moving. No breath, just a silhouette with shoulders too square and posture too flat. I didn't speak. I didn't move. I stared until my eyes watered. When I blinked, it was gone. I turned on the lamp. Nothing. I checked the cameras. Nothing on the footage. Not even motion detection flags. The next day, I reset the router and took apart my security setup. Everything looked fine, but that night as I tried to fall asleep again, my smart home assistant gave a soft chime, 3 ascending tones. Then in its flat synthetic voice announced, "Warning, irregular presence detected, defensive posture recommended." That assistant had been manually disabled the day I moved in. I checked. Still off. No power. No input history. The log said it hadn't been activated in over a week. I unplugged it entirely. The third night, I didn't sleep at all. I kept the lights on, my laptop open, a static security feed looping on the screen. Around 3:12 a.m., the media app I'd left running on mute began flickering. Not a full crash, just the user icon on the account homepage started shifting. It was supposed to be a photo of me, but now it pulsed through symbols I didn't recognize. Circles inside triangles, jagged lines through faces, text in a font that kept shifting. I leaned closer and saw that each message lasted just long enough to read before being overwritten. "We see." "Closer now." "Why did you lock the door?" That last one made my stomach clench. I turned toward the entrance to the unit. Still bolted. Still dead silent. I didn't sleep after that. I changed every password I had, factory reset the assistant, and severed the router from every smart device I owned. For good measure, I left the breaker off that night. No power, no signals, just me and a battery flashlight. And nothing happened. No figure, no voice. The icon stayed normal. Even the temperature felt warmer somehow, less damp. For a moment, I let myself believe it was over, that maybe I'd somehow let stress spiral into hallucination, that none of it had been real. But I kept thinking about how that presence had started in the room, how it hadn't needed the screen, the voice, the signals. Those came later. I never reconnected the smart devices, never used that media account again. I moved upstairs a month later, paid extra. The landlord never asked why. Every so often I wake up thinking I've seen that silhouette again, just before it vanishes into the wall or blinks out of the dark. Maybe it was never about the basement. Maybe it was just the first place I noticed it. I always thought my cousin Lena was dramatic, especially when it came to the old house on Grayson Ridge. She'd inherited it from our great aunt, and from day one, she refused to live in it. She stayed just long enough to pack up the valuables, then handed me the keys and muttered something under her breath as she left. "Don't ignore the footsteps. And if you hear laughter in the front room, don't come out." I laughed it off. I'd always wanted a big place to myself, and the house was beautiful, arched doorways, creaky but solid wooden floors, a wraparound porch that caught the morning light just right. My sister Meg helped me move in. She brought her friend Rory along, and the 3 of us spent that first weekend drinking boxed wine and pretending we were in an old movie. The first couple of days were uneventful. During daylight, everything felt completely ordinary. Sure, the house made noises, timber settling, wind through the attic vents, but nothing unusual for a place that old. Rory, a self-proclaimed skeptic, joked that Lena had just wanted to dump the place and scare me out of asking questions. Even Meg dismissed the warnings. "Every old house has a ghost story," she shrugged. But on the 3rd day, something changed. We'd all been up late, binging horror movies until we passed out in the living room. Around 3 in the afternoon the next day, Rory decided to shower in the guest suite at the back of the house. I was half asleep in a sunbeam on the couch when I heard the slam. Not a knock, an aggressive, violent slam of the guest bathroom door. Then a scream. Meg and I rushed to the hallway. Rory stood in a towel, pale and dripping. eyes locked on the bathroom door behind him. The door had flung open with such force that the hook latch had snapped off. He swore he'd locked it. There was nobody there, he kept saying, but something pushed it open. We searched the house. Nothing. No animals. No people. Every window locked. I tried to write it off as pressure changes in the old plumbing. Maybe a gust of wind, but the tension stayed with us. That night, Rory didn't say much. He left the next morning and didn't come back. That's when I started noticing the sounds. I'd be in the kitchen making lunch, and I'd hear the creak of floorboards upstairs, deliberate pacing steps. Once I called up thinking Meg was home early, but her car wasn't in the driveway. I went upstairs. No one. Later, while doing laundry, I heard humming. A child's voice. Just a few notes, tuneless and airy, like it was drifting from the far side of the house. I followed it room to room, holding my breath. It stopped the second I entered the hallway. Meg insisted it was the pipes. "This place breathes," she said. "It's just air and wood shifting around." But it wasn't just sound. Late one evening, I was using the master bathroom with the door cracked open to hear the TV in the next room. The house was quiet. No guests. No music. As I rinsed my face, something broke the silence. Laughter. Not Meg's. Not Rory's. It was guttural. Childlike in pitch, but not in tone. Rasping and too loud for comfort. Echoing through the front sitting room like it came from a speaker set to just below distortion. I froze, soap still clinging to my cheeks. It didn't trail off or fade. It stopped abruptly, like it knew I was listening. I didn't move for a long time. Eventually, I forced myself to walk out. Every light in the house was still on. Nothing had shifted. No doors ajar. No footsteps running off into the distance. Just the same pristine silence. That night, I remembered Lena's warning. Don't ignore the footsteps, and if you hear laughter in the front room, don't come out. I didn't tell Meg. I couldn't. Not yet. But I started keeping odd hours, waiting to shower until she was home, avoiding certain rooms after dusk. We never saw anything, never caught anything on tape, but the sounds continued. Some mornings we'd wake to find cabinet doors hanging open in the kitchen. Once I heard a low adult voice whispering on the stairs at 4 a.m. Just 3 words, muffled and slow, like someone rehearsing speech patterns. We don't go upstairs at night anymore. We keep the doors shut tight, and no one stays over. Meg still jokes sometimes, but there's a tension in her voice now. We've both heard it. We both know. I never moved out. I couldn't afford to. Over time, I've learned the rhythms. I keep the radio on during the day. I never lock the guest bathroom door. And when I hear that laugh again, I stay exactly where I am, breath held, waiting for it to stop. And it always does. Eventually,